We are back again with On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMAPlay365. I'm your host Newsome, and we're here again at the Apex in Vegas for UFC Vegas 16. The event will be headlined with Jack Hermansson versus Marvin Vettori. How we've got to this main event is crazy, as the main event was originally scheduled to be Hermansson versus Till, but then Till pulled out. The UFC then brought in Kevin Holland to replace Hermansson, but then Holland pulled out due to a positive COVID-19 test. The UFC then upgraded Vettori to the main event slot against Hermansson, but Vettori was actually scheduled to fight next week at UFC 256 against Jacare Souza, so that left Jacare without an opponent. So the UFC then matched Holland against Jacare, which will go down next week too. A crazy turn of events here, and I personally prefer the Hermansson versus Vettori and Jacare versus Holland matchups anyway. But just before we get into the breakdowns, last Saturday was a decent night overall at MMAPlay365. We only had one official bet due to two fights being cancelled, which is the common 2020 trend here. But that official bet was Miguel Baeza, who put on an absolute clinic against Takashi Sato and made it look easy. The dog of the week was Anderson dos Santos, who got Martin Day out of there in the first round. The fun parlays fell short on the night, which is unusual, but there were a lot of surprising performances and results last week, and that's just the fight game. Remember, we have multiple packages on the MMAPlay365 website for all the UFC betting advice you'll ever need. We also have various subscription lengths and options too, so to see our full service list, please go and visit MMAPlay365.com for more information or to sign up today. And let's break down some fights. In the main event, we've got Jack Hermansson versus Marvin Vettori. Marvin Vettori is currently the minus 135 favourite. The comeback on Hermansson at plus 115 as the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, I do think that the value sits with the underdog in Jack Hermansson. I am a little surprised that he's the underdog in this spot. I was expecting him to be a slight favourite, maybe minus 125, minus 130, potentially even a complete line flip from where we're at now. So for that reason, I do think that the value sits with Hermansson. As for where the line moves the closer we get to fight night on Saturday night, I do suspect that we're going to see Hermansson money coming in at some point during this week. It has been fluctuating a little bit over the last 24 to 48 hours, well, since the line was released, but come fight night on Saturday night, I would expect the line to be close to a pick'em. As for how this fight plays out though, I do think that Hermansson's got a lot of advantages in this fight, but let's start with what Vettori brings to the table. Vettori's a southpaw striker, he's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he's good on the mat, his submission grappling's good, he's aggressive, he likes to be in your face, he loves to come forward, pump volume out. Because of that volume, I do feel that his cardio suffers a little bit, although it has been getting better over his last couple of fights. But typically at the end of round 2, going into round 3, you do start to see Vettori slowing down. And that's going to be a concern in this fight, because this is a 5-round fight and Vettori wasn't training for a 5-round fight. He was training for a 3-round fight with Jacare. So from a cardio perspective, there's definitely some concerns there for Marvin Vettori. On to Jack Hermansson though. Jack Hermansson definitely isn't as good as a striker from a technical perspective as Vettori, but again, Hermansson's a fighter that likes to come forward. He's a very unorthodox fighter with an unorthodox style as well. His movement is very erratic, lateral movement, in and out of range. He's very difficult to get reads on, and it's the same when he starts being offensive with his own strikes. The kicks, the punches mixed together. He's just a hard fighter to read, and it does cause problems for opponents. But where Jack Hermansson really shines is on the mat. The mistake he made in the Jared Cannonier fight for me was going to traditional wrestling takedowns like the double legs and the single legs. That's not really where he shines. His takedowns come from foot sweeps, from throws, basically just getting a body lock around his opponent and working the fight to the mat from there. He didn't do that against Cannonier, and he didn't have a lot of success, and if he does the same thing against Vettori, I think Vettori is much better suited to defending traditional wrestling takedowns, again, like the double legs, like the single legs. So for me, Hermansson has got to make the right choices in this fight. If Hermansson ties up with Vettori and starts looking to go to that foot sweep, then we could see Vettori on his back, and it wouldn't surprise me if Hermansson did go in with that type of takedown approach and get Vettori down in that way. And on the mat, like I've said, Vettori's a good grappler, but Hermansson is just something else. The amount of black belts that he's taken out on the mat is absolutely ridiculous. Taila's late's a black belt. Jack Hermansson got him out via ground and pound in round 3. Jack Hermansson was also injured in that fight. He got injured at the start of round 2, so that was super impressive. Gerald Meerschaert, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he choked him out in round 1 after absolutely dominating him in that top position. David Branch choked out in 49 seconds, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And then we moved to Kelvin Gastelum. He submitted him in round 1 with a heel hook, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And the only other fighter that is a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but he didn't get out of there, was Jacare Souza, who was a 4th degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And although he didn't finish Jacare, when that fight did hit the mat, Hermansson looked totally comfortable, and Jacare is a monster down on the mat. That's his world. So for me, when you're looking at the grappling of both Hermansson and Vettori here, I just feel that although Vettori is the calmer grappler, the fighter that looks to control a little bit more safely on the mat, Jack Hermansson is so much more dangerous than Vettori when it goes down there. And I'm really looking forward to these grappling exchanges. I think the fight is going to hit the mat from time to time. It is a 5-round fight, so the longer it goes on, I feel the more likely we are to see these grappling exchanges. And Vettori's got to be really careful, because if Vettori is the one shooting takedowns, he does leave his neck a little bit exposed, and if he does that, I can guarantee that Hermansson's going to be looking for that modified guillotine that he likes to choke fighters out with. And I call it modified because it's not a traditional guillotine in regards to wrapping the neck and getting into full guard and then squeezing in that position. It's more set up and completed from the side. It's an arm-in guillotine, and Hermansson can get a really solid squeeze on that as well. For me, with Vettori, I think he's got to keep this fight standing. He's got to try and get Hermansson moving backwards. That's the key here. If he can start tagging Hermansson up, but not get too close to him that Hermansson ties up with him, I think that's how Vettori's going to win this fight. But the problem is, Vettori doesn't pack that one-punch knockout power, traditionally anyway. I'm not saying he can't knock Hermansson out with one clean punch. He hits hard, 4-ounce gloves. Of course that could happen, but he typically just doesn't have that one-punch fight-ending power. So what that means for Vettori is he's got to keep up that volume. He's got to keep up that aggression, that forward pressure for an entire 5 rounds if he can't get Hermansson out of there. And as I've already mentioned, I think the cardio is a big question mark on Vettori. Hermansson was training for 5 rounds. He has gone 5 rounds before. He did slow down towards the end of that 5-round fight with Jacare, but it was a high-paced fight. He had a lot of activity. He was pumping out a lot of volume. It was his first 5-round fight in the UFC, so it was to be expected, and I do expect that from Vettori this time around. I think if Vettori can't out-volume Hermansson, if he can't keep this fight vertical, he's going to be in trouble. And ultimately, I feel that Hermansson is going to match him for that volume. Hermansson isn't as technical as him as a striker, but the judges don't look for technique, they look for what lands. And Hermansson does pump out a lot of volume. I do think Hermansson's going to get Vettori down to the mat at times. If Vettori gets him down, then Vettori's going to run the risk of getting submitted in that takedown, so I'm not sure if that's going to be in his game plan. But I think Hermansson is going to have some success against Vettori on the mat. Hermansson's got devastating ground and pound, solid submissions, good control, and ultimately I think that's going to be the difference on the night. So for those reasons, I'm picking Jack Hermansson to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Ovince St. Preux versus Jamahal Hill. Hill is currently the minus 160 favourite to come back on St. Preux at plus 140 as the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, I do think there's slight value in Hill at minus 160. I feel that after OSP's last couple of fights, you probably would want a slightly better betting line to fade him, but Jamahal Hill is a good fighter. He's proven to look better each time out, so I do understand the betting line, and at minus 160, after the fight, it might look like you've just stolen those odds. As for where the betting line moves, there has been money coming in on OSP over the last 24 to 48 hours. This line was a little wider a couple of days ago, and I do understand that money coming in on OSP, but I feel at some point it's going to hit that brick wall and the money's going to come back in on Jamahal Hill. Ultimately, it just wouldn't surprise me if we got to fight night on Saturday night and Jamahal Hill entered the cage at minus 175 with OSP roughly around plus 150, plus 155. As for how this fight plays out, you have to hand it to OSP. A lot of people, including myself, had written him off just a couple of years ago, but he came back in there. He came back against Michal Oleksiejczuk after getting absolutely demolished for nearly a round and a half and finished him. He then stepped up to heavyweight against Ben Rothwell. He gave a good account of himself up at heavyweight as well. He then came back down against Alonzo Menafield, again a fight where I thought Menafield would blow him out of the water, and that didn't happen. You know, OSP used his veteran skills. He really put it on Alonzo Menafield. He didn't allow Menafield to get off on these hard, big winging strikes that's been knocking his opponents out. So OSP nullified the biggest weapon of Menafield and ultimately just really poured it on him and finished him in devastating fashion, which again was a surprise to see, for me at least anyway. So you've got to give OSP credit. However, here with Jamahal Hill, this is going to be a little bit of a different fight. He's not going to have a fighter in front of him that's trying to land a one bomb. He's going to have a fighter in front of him that's long, that's rangy, and that's aware of his own range, aware of that distance management. But the difference is with Jamahal Hill, he's going to be pumping out constant volume, not looking for that one big shot that's going to knock OSP out. And that's what I think is actually going to win Jamahal Hill this fight. And if Hill wins this fight and knocks OSP out, it's going to be because of the accumulation of strikes that's landing, not that one big shot that absolutely deads him. And that for me is where OSP does struggle. The last fighter that I feel has similar qualities that did that same type of work against OSP was Dominic Reyes. Again, just pumping out volume, fighting long, really putting it on him. And ultimately, that's how you beat OSP if you're one of these younger guns. You can't be going in there and looking to get him out of there in round one with a big punch, because OSP is just a lot smarter than that. Ultimately, I think Jamahal Hill has got a really high ceiling. I really like his volume. I like his activity. I like the fact that he will come forward, that he's not going to be fazed by anyone. And those are the traits and the skills and the qualities that he's going to beat a veteran like OSP. So for those reasons, I'm picking Jamahal Hill to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Taila Santos versus Montana De La Rosa. Taila Santos is currently the minus 220 favourite. The comeback on De La Rosa at plus 180 is the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, I don't think there's too much value right now where the betting lines are sitting. I definitely understand why Taila Santos is the favourite in this spot, but I feel that the line is quite fair. And if it does get any wider, if Taila Santos does get up to minus 240, minus 250, then there might be value created on the side of the underdog with De La Rosa. As for where the betting line moves though, I do think it might have hit this brick wall at minus 220. I do expect to see some people betting Montana De La Rosa to get the job done, which should bring the betting line on Taila Santos down. It wouldn't shock me to see Taila Santos enter the cage on Saturday night just below minus 200. As for how the fight plays out though, Taila Santos has had a very conflicting start in the UFC. She opened up against Mara Romero Barella. She looked quite poor on the debut there. She didn't really get started. She started to put it together a little bit more towards the end of the fight, but ultimately it was too little too late. And this was a fighter that was hyped quite a bit. You know, she'd look great on the regional scene outside of the UFC. She's got a solid Muay Thai background. A lot of people are excited to see her. Ultimately, she didn't perform. Against Molly McCann, she came in there. This time, the hype had gone. She was a plus 250 underdog to Molly McCann, and she came in there and looked absolutely phenomenal. The fighter that we all thought we were going to see on the UFC debut. Striking crisp, aggression crisp, a lot of volume, accuracy on every single thing that she threw. She was hurting McCann. She was winning the clinch position. She was taking McCann down. She was looking good on the mat. She just dominated from bell to bell. Phenomenal performance. And that's the Taila Santos I think is the real Taila Santos. I don't think the way that she fought in a UFC debut accurately represents her skill set and how good she is of a fighter. On to Montana De La Rosa. De La Rosa, again, she's a tough fighter to beat. She's got good wrestling. When she gets on top, she's got a good level of control as well. Her jiu-jitsu is decent. But I do think that she's going to run into a couple of problems here against Santos. The first problem is the striking. All fights start standing. And I just think that Santos' striking is going to be levels above where De La Rosa's at. It could force De La Rosa to start shooting takedowns. Those will be desperation takedowns. I don't think it's going to be easy to take Santos down in general, but if those takedowns are desperate takedowns, I think that makes it easier for Santos to defend takedowns. Santos could potentially take De La Rosa down and put her on her back. I'm not sure it'll be the smartest game plan because I do think the biggest difference in skill set here is within that striking department. And if De La Rosa can't get Santos down, or if she can't get her down enough to make this a key factor in the fight and make the fight won and lost because of the wrestling and grappling, then she's going to lose this fight. And ultimately, I don't think that this fight is going to be won and lost on the mat in the wrestling and grappling departments. I feel it's going to be won and lost on the feet. I think the fighter with the better striking, the more volume, the greater aggression is going to be the fighter to get the hand raised on the night. And with that in mind, I just cannot look past Santos here. The other thing to mention really quickly as well is I heard that De La Rosa has had some training difficulties. She's not been able to get to a coach. She's been doing a lot of calls via Zoom with a coach every day. Again, it's just not a good look at all when you're preparing for a fight inside the UFC. So with everything considered and merged together, I'm picking Taila Santos to win this fight. And in the next fight, this should be a violent one. We've got Roman Dolidze versus John Allan. Roman Dolidze is currently the -185 favourite. The comeback on Allan at +160 as the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, I do feel there's very, very marginal value on Dolidze. There's been a lot of money coming in over him over the last couple of days. I feel if this hits -190, -195, maybe even -200, then that value on Dolidze will just disappear because that would be a betting line I feel is relatively fair. If Dolidze ended up -250 come fight night on Saturday night, then absolutely the value would be on the underdog in Allan. As for where the betting line moves though, I do think that we see more money coming in on Dolidze. As I've just said, the money has been on him over the last 24 to 48 hours. I do think that Dolidze will hit that -200 mark, but I feel if it does, then that'll be his brick wall. I think money will come back in on John Allan as people will see value there. Ultimately, come fight night on Saturday night, I think both fighters will step inside the cage with the betting lines roughly where they're at right about now. As for how this fight plays out though, as I've already said, it should be a violent fight. Both fighters love to fight on the front foot. They love to be aggressive. They love to push forward. They love to inflict damage on their opponents in regards to the striking. They're both really well-rounded fighters as well. Roman Dolidze, when you watch him on tape, the first impression that I got is that he's quite low volume. He waits for the right time to throw a big punch to try and knock his opponents out. He does have power, but actually when you continue to watch tape and you dig a little bit deeper, you start to see that he's not a low volume fighter because he's over patient and he's looking for his one opportunity to put his opponent out. The low volume comes from the fact that his opponents just don't want to engage with him. And I think that's a real problem that he's had. He's looking to bait his opponent in because they're just not doing anything. They're moving backwards. They're allowing Dolidze's aggression to take over. And ultimately what that leads Dolidze to be doing is chasing his opponent, which is clear that he doesn't like to do that. He likes to be in a war. He likes to stand and bang, and ultimately that's where he's dangerous, and ultimately that's the type of fight I feel he's going to get against John Allan, because Allan isn't that type of fighter that will be on the back foot constantly, that will be scared of engage. And I think Allan will absolutely engage. He'll just engage in different ways. So he'll be setting things up with a low kick, he'll be looking for fundamentals, a nice jab, but ultimately for the strikes that Allan's going to be landing on Dolidze is going to be inside the range where Dolidze can fire back without any issues. And that's why I think this fight is not only going to be violent, but it's going to be a really good fight. And I feel that we're going to see the best version of Roman Dolidze in this fight. And at the start of the breakdown, I did say that both fighters were very well rounded, and that is the case. I've only mentioned the striking so far. In regards to the grappling, we've got John Allan that trains in the gi, that is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He also trains with the likes of Vinicius Mejia, which you can say what you like about that dude. Obviously, it didn't work out for him in the UFC, but that dude is a legit grappler, and he's a fighter that's actually beaten John Allan in the Brazilian version of Dana White's Contender Series. So Allan's gone back to him to look into getting that work and to improve his ground game. But the real surprise for me was when I dug into Roman Dolidze. So it turns out that Roman Dolidze isn't just a crazy, aggressive, angry striker. Roman Dolidze is a world grappling champion, a European grappling champion, the ADCC Asia and Oceania 2016 champion. This guy has got legit grappling. I actually watched a video of him in a grappling bout with Nikita Krylov, who is also a fighter that I think's got really good grappling, and he pulled Nikita Krylov into butterfly guard. He lifted him up so he could try and attack the leg, and after a bit of a scramble, he tapped Krylov out quite quickly with a leg submission. So Dolidze is no joke on the mat either. I like Dolidze in this fight. I feel that the striking element, which I've just spoken about in regards to Allan potentially not even going to be considering backing off and will look to try and match Dolidze strike for strike, and in regards to volume as well, I think that will bring out the best version of Roman Dolidze, and the dude hits so damn hard. I feel that if he does catch Allan inside a punching exchange, inside a brawl, he's going to put him away. If this fight does hit the mat, although Allan's the black belt, he should be the one technically that looks better down there. That should be his world. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Dolidze is going to be very good down there. I think he's going to have a sneaky grappling game that we just haven't seen too much of yet in mixed martial arts. I think Dolidze could be a bit of a hidden gem in this division. I'm picking Roman Dolidze to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Movsar Evloev versus Nate Landwehr. Evloev is currently the minus 570 favourite. The comeback on Landwehr at plus 435 as the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, honestly, I don't think there's much value at all. Evloev, definitely the rightful favourite. Definitely the rightful heavy favourite, but at minus 570, it's hard to place much value there. The betting line's just too wide. As for where the betting line moves, I do think it's going to be one of those fights where Evloev finds himself in a lot of those parlays, and suddenly that minus 570 turns to minus 600, minus 650, potentially even minus 700. So what I'm saying is I do think that the money is going to continue to come in on Evloev. I think he'll just be a part of a lot of parlays, that's all. As for how this fight plays out though, I think Evloev is a super serious talent. He's a fighter that's looking better every time that we see him inside the cage. He's got solid wrestling, good entries on his takedowns. He can get fights on the mat if he needs to. But then when you look at his striking's solid. It's crisp, it's accurate. He's got good fundamentals. He doesn't go out there winging wild shots. He doesn't go out there overreaching, overexerting himself, wasting unnecessary cardio. Everything that he puts together is really clean and crisp, and it's really a pleasure to watch inside the cage. And he's going to be a very difficult fighter to beat, because if you can be that aggressive fighter that gets through that clean, crisp striking, you're going to be dealt with a guy that's just a beast wrestler as well, and going to be able to double leg you and take you down. And ultimately that's why I feel this fight is a stylistic nightmare for Nate Landwehr. And Nate Landwehr has fought fighters like Evloev before. He's been in bad spots. He's managed to overcome that heavy wrestling pressure and be able to turn the fight around and get wins. But Landwehr's previous opponents are absolutely nowhere close to the level of Evloev, and I don't think Landwehr's going to be able to deal with the technical aspect of Evloev's striking. However, with that being said, the one aspect of Landwehr's game that I will give him credit for is the ability to eat shots whilst coming forward. Is extremely durable. He keeps his face in the face of his opponent, doesn't really give him a lot of room to work. But ultimately I don't think that's going to be enough in this fight, and I don't think it's going to be enough to stifle the technical striking of Evloev. It might do temporarily, but the in-cage adjustments will be made from Evloev and he'll come back stronger. And also, like I say, Evloev has that plan B of, if it does start working out for Landwehr, being aggressive, getting in the face of Evloev, he's just going to level change and take Landwehr down and control him on the mat. I honestly think this is a very, very tough fight for Landwehr, and I don't see too many opportunities, too many windows of opportunity for Landwehr to get his hand raised in this fight. I think it's going to be a really tough one unless he knocks Evloev out with a big punch that shocks the world. I just feel that Evloev's the better striker technically. He's got better cardio, better wrestling, better grappling, and I just think it's going to be a bad night for Nate Landwehr, so I'm picking Movsar Evloev to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Villante versus Jake Collier. Villante is currently the -200 favourite. The comeback on Collier at +170 is the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, honestly, I don't think there is any value at all. Both fighters are blown up heavyweights at this point. -200 on Villante is absolutely nuts if you're laying that down, but do you really want to play the +170 on Jake Collier? The money line here is not good. As for where the betting line moves, I do think the lines close up a little bit because the -200 on Villante is much more crazy than the +170 on Jake Collier. Ultimately, as the favourite, I think Villante will go into the fight on Saturday night, maybe at -175, -170. As for how the fight plays out though, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but at this point it is probably as low level heavyweight as you can possibly get. You've got Villante that's a blown up heavyweight, blown up from light heavyweight, and then you've got Jake Collier that used to fight at middleweight, and he just looks like a totally different human being up at heavyweight. He didn't look good against Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall, to his credit, is a phenomenal fighter, and a fighter I'm really looking forward to seeing how far he can go in the UFC and how high his ceiling is, but ultimately Jake Collier wasn't even remotely competitive there. Villante, in his last fight against Maurice Green, totally out of shape, looked really flat. He had a couple of moments in the middle of the fight, but was ultimately beaten relatively comfortably by Green in the end. It's just a fight where it's so hard to call because both of these fighters are carrying weight that they're not used to. They're not going to be able to pump out as much volume as they used to, and both of their styles are subsequently affected as well. What I will say about this fight in regards to my prediction and how I feel this fight is going to play out, I think the fight is going to be won and lost on the feet. I'd be really surprised if it was won and lost in the wrestling and grappling departments because I just don't think either of them have got the cardio at this point at heavyweight to keep up that sort of heavy wrestling and grappling pace throughout 15 minutes. I do feel that whoever wins this fight is going to win the fight because they've either landed more volume on the feet, been more active, or knocked their opponent out. For that reason, I do edge towards Villante. I think Villante at this point will just produce a little bit more volume, will have that technical advantage very slightly over Jake Collier. He's just got to be careful that Jake Collier doesn't start to try and take him down, but again, if he does that, then it's probably going to be to the detriment of Jake Collier because he will tire more trying to wrestle and grapple with Villante. Like I say, I think the fight's going to take place on the feet. I think it's going to be won and lost on the feet. I'm not sure that we see a knockout in this fight. If we don't, then I do favour Villante to outstrike Jake Collier very slightly over a 15-minute fight. I'm picking Villante to win this fight. In the next fight, we've got Matt Wiman versus Jordan Leavitt. Jordan Leavitt is currently the -400 favourite. The comeback on Wiman at +325 as the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, honestly, again, I don't see too much value. I think the line is way too wide for Leavitt. From what I've seen on tape, it should be much closer. I do think that Leavitt is the rightful favourite, but the line's just way too wide in my opinion, so no value on the money line here. As for where the betting line moves, the closer we get to fight night, I do think that there's going to be a little bit of fluctuation here. I think we do see Leavitt maybe go up to -420, -425, but at some point that money coming in on Leavitt has to stop. There will be some Wiman money coming in. Ultimately, on Saturday night, I don't think these fighters are going to step into the cage with the betting lines too far off from where they're at right about now. As for how this fight plays out though, initially when I first started watching Jordan Leavitt, he reminded me a lot of Joe Solecki, especially in this fight as well, because obviously Joe Solecki fought Matt Wiman, a fight where I actually bet Joe Solecki in a parlay. So I did see some similarities in regards to the grappling. You know, Leavitt's got a wrestling background, he's very tricky on the mat. Positionally, he's okay as well. He'll throw submissions up whenever he can. He'll throw submissions up in volume, as crazy as it sounds, and just try and lock in anything that presents itself to him. But ultimately, as an overall fighter, I'm not too convinced on Leavitt yet, and it's not because I don't think he's got the skills. I just think he's quite a green fighter, and the room for development in Leavitt is very, very great. And I think because of that, there should be some risks at taking Jordan Leavitt at minus 400 here. Although I do feel that he is rightfully favoured in this fight, I just don't think it should be that wide. Somebody like Matt Wiman, it wouldn't shock me to see him, the veteran, come in here and using that experience to really stifle Jordan Leavitt and again surprise a lot of people. The differences between Matt Wiman versus Jordan Leavitt and Matt Wiman versus Joe Solecki is that I think Joe Solecki was a lot more advanced in his overall MMA game than Jordan Leavitt, and also the grappling of Joe Solecki was at a much higher level than Jordan Leavitt's grappling game as well. So that made it easy to bet Joe Solecki in that fight, but it's just a little bit different here with Leavitt. Leavitt can look good in fights, tends to be more earlier than later. We have seen him tire a bit. I have seen him be very desperate for takedowns, shooting in from way too far out takedowns you just would not expect to even score regionally, never mind in the UFC. So for me, I think Leavitt's got a lot of work to be put in to his MMA game to develop, to grow, and that opportunity to develop and grow is huge for Leavitt. It's definitely there. He's got a decent wrestling background, he's got good grappling skills, and those types of fighters normally do develop to be quite good fighters if they put the hard work in, if they pick the right gym to help them develop, choose the right fights. I do think the room for development for Leavitt is absolutely there, but in this fight, he might not need those developments. He might win this fight. I do think he's going to win this fight, but I just don't think the minus 400 betting line warrants exactly where he is right now in his MMA career. But with that said, I do think he's going to be able to score takedowns early against Matt Wiman. I do think he's going to be a submission threat. He could potentially get Wiman out of there early. If he doesn't, I think he could replicate a similar game plan into round 2. And if he does win round 2, at that point, Wyman's going to need a finish, which I don't think comes for him, unfortunately. I'm picking Jordan Leavitt to win this fight. And in the next fight, this one's going to be phenomenal to watch from a grappling perspective. We've got Jimmy Flick versus Cody Durden. Jimmy Flick is currently the minus 165 favourite. The comeback on Durden at plus 145 as the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, I do think that the value sits slightly with Jimmy Flick right now at minus 165. A lot of money has come in on Cody Durden over the last few days. Jimmy Flick was up at minus 200 in some spots, which I think is too high, but right now I do see some value on Jimmy Flick. As for where the betting line moves, as I've already mentioned, all the money over the last few days has come in on Cody Durden. It's closed the line quite a bit from minus 200 to minus 165. I do expect that trend to continue for a little bit, but I do think that Jimmy Flick's brick wall might be around minus 150, minus 155 before we see that money coming back in on Flick and pushing him back out. Ultimately, when these two step into the cage on Saturday night, I don't think the betting lines are going to be too far off from where they're at right about now. As for how this fight plays out though, as I've mentioned, from a grappling perspective, this is just going to be phenomenal. Let's talk about the striking very quickly though. Both fighters can strike. It's not as if the wrestlers and grapplers only. They can both put together combinations, they'll both move forward, they'll both try to be aggressive, they'll both mix in kicks as well, but both of their striking is just a tool, is just an aid for them to close the distance, look to level change and get their opponents down on the mat. I do think from a striking perspective this fight is very close. If this fight was going to be won and lost on the feet, then it would be a very close fight. I'd probably still give the edge just to Jimmy Flick though. As for the wrestling and grappling, both are good wrestlers, both have got the ability to get each other on the mat, and I think from that point of view, that's what makes this fight really exciting, because I ultimately think whoever is the better wrestler in this fight is going to be the fighter that spends more time on top of their opponent, and it's going to be that fighter that's likely going to get their hand raised at the end of the night. The difference is between the fighters here though is the level that they're both at on the mat. I think they're both really good grapplers. It's just I feel that Jimmy Flick edges Cody Durden in the wrestling. He edges him in the grappling, in the transitions from position to position, submission ability. I just feel that Jimmy Flick has that slight edge over Durden wherever this fight goes, and ultimately that's why I think Durden's going to struggle. So it's like, if Durden takes Jimmy Flick down, I'm going to be much more comfortable watching Jimmy Flick potentially hit a sweep, hit a reversal, submit from bottom, or get back up to his feet than I am if Flick's on top of Durden. If Flick gets on top of Durden, I think Durden is going to be a little lost off his back, whereas I don't think Flick's going to be lost too much off his back with Durden on top, and I feel that's going to be the difference in this fight. I do think that this fight is going to be won and lost on the mat, in the grappling exchanges, who's the more dominant, who's getting the more dominant positions, who's topside, who's submission hunting. And that's the thing with Jimmy Flick, he does not stop searching for submissions. Durden is more of a fighter that will get on top, will look to safely control the fight as best he can without putting him or his opponent in too much danger. Obviously, if an opportunity presents itself for a submission or for ground and pound, Durden will look for it. But Jimmy Flick is absolutely trying to finish that fight at all times on the mat. I think that's going to look good in the judges' eyes should this fight hit the scorecards. I'm not sure if it does hit the cards, because I do think the scrambles are going to be crazy in this fight, but ultimately I think that Jimmy Flick's the more likely to win on the scorecards over 15 minutes. He's more likely to find a finish on the mat, therefore he's more dangerous. For those reasons, I'm picking Jimmy Flick to win this fight. And in the next fight, talking of grappling, we've got Damon Jackson versus Ilia Topuria. Topuria is currently the -230 favourite. The comeback on Jackson at +190 is the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, I'm not sure there is too much value. I would maybe edge some value still to Topuria, but if Topuria starts hitting -250, -260, then I feel the line is going to be closer to fair than it is going to have some value on the underdog in Damon Jackson. As for where the betting line moves, I do think that we see more money coming in on Jackson the closer we get to fight night. It does seem that there's a lot of love out there for Topuria, but ultimately I think from a stylistic perspective, this fight is going to force people to lay money on Damon Jackson if he is a big underdog. As for how this fight plays out though, very similar to what I've just mentioned in the last fight with Flick and Durden. I feel that both of these fighters can strike, but the striking is just a means to the grappling, to get into takedowns, to start working the wrestling and get the fight to the mat. And when these fighters are on the mat, they are fun to watch. Topuria, for those that have been following me on Twitter and listening to my podcasts for quite a while, you'll know exactly how I feel about this guy. I was absolutely buzzing to see him get the call to the UFC in his last fight, where I also cashed him as a relatively sized underdog as well against Youssef Zalal. It was a solid fight from Topuria, good rounds, did struggle a little bit in regards to the gas at the end, maybe blown his arms out, maybe, just pushed himself a little bit too much, maybe those UFC jitters and adrenaline got to him a little bit too much, but ultimately a solid performance against Youssef Zalal, who was actually a good fighter himself. So that shows you what level Topuria is on. I think he's a very solid fighter that is going to blast through a lot of these fighters in the division. I think people will be quite surprised of how high up the rankings Topuria gets, if I'm being honest. But Damon Jackson is game on the mat. We saw that in his last fight in his second UFC debut against Mirsad Bektic. He was very tricky for Bektic to deal with. He was constantly being a threat on the mat, causing problems, and ultimately got a win against a fighter that I do believe is difficult to beat. And I know a lot of people don't look at Bektic the same as they used to. I still think he's a good fighter, and I still think that's a good win for Damon Jackson. Here though, against Topuria, I do think that Jackson might have more success trying to keep this fight standing. He is going to be a little bit taller, a little bit longer, reach advantage. So although he's not a striker, I do feel that if he's had a good camp here, devised a game plan that allows him to stand, that allows him to stay at range and fire in, then I think he's going to have more success there. Topuria will close the distance if he tries that. He will take him down anyway. But at that point, Damon Jackson can use his grappling to try and nullify what Topuria brings to the table. But unfortunately for Damon Jackson, if he does have that game plan. I still don't think the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet. Like I said in the last breakdown on this podcast with Flick and Durden, I feel like the winner of this fight is going to be the fighter that has spent more time in top position, that's had more control time on the mat. And because Topuria's wrestling is also as good as his grappling, I feel that that's where he's going to have the big advantage here. Damon Jackson can grapple. He's a good, tricky, unorthodox guy to deal with on the mat. But if he can't be the one taking Topuria down and getting on top of Topuria, then he's not going to be the one scoring points on the mat. It's going to be Topuria who's taking Jackson down, who's laying on top of Jackson, hunting submissions on Jackson, moving from position to position on Jackson. And ultimately, that's where Topuria's advantage is in this fight in regards to the wrestling. It's going to allow him to get those dominant positions that's likely going to earn him the victory on the night. For those reasons, I'm picking Ilia Topuria to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Gabriel Benitez versus Justin Jaynes. Benitez is currently the minus 210 favourite. The comeback on Jaynes at plus 175 as the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, I do think the line is relatively fair where it is now, so I don't see too much value if I'm being honest. But as for where the betting line moves, all the money has been coming in on Gabriel Benitez. Benitez opened up at plus 115. Since then, the line has just got worse and worse day by day, week by week, to the point where Gabriel Benitez has gone from a plus 115 underdog to a minus 210 favourite. I do think that trend will continue, but that brick wall on Benitez's odds isn't too far away from where we're at now. I think if Benitez gets to minus 225, minus 230, minus 240, then at some point that money is going to come back in on Justin Jaynes, closing that line up a little bit. Ultimately, come fight night on Saturday night, I think Benitez will be minus 200, minus 210. As for how the fight plays out, I do think that this fight is going to be won and lost on the feet. You have got Justin Jaynes, who has that wrestling background. We saw that wrestling a lot more on the regional scene than we have seen in the UFC, but the wrestling is going to be there. I just feel that he had more success with it on the regional scene just because the level of opponents that he was facing. I'm not sure how much that wrestling game is going to work against Gabriel Benitez. He has been notoriously hard to take down during his career, and the fighters that have taken him down, he's managed to spring back up quite quickly after. So not only is he a tough fighter to take down, he's a tough fighter to keep down, and that's why I think that this fight is going to be won and lost on the feet, because Benitez probably isn't going to want any part of the wrestling or grappling here, and he'll be the one that can keep himself vertical, which ultimately keeps this fight standing on the feet, striking. And this is where I feel Benitez is going to have advantages in this fight. I do think that Benitez is going to be the faster fighter here. I don't think he's going to hit as hard as what Jaynes hits, so Benitez is definitely going to have to be careful of taking one clean on the chin, because one clean on the chin could put him out. But you look at the fight that Benitez had with Omar Morales, that fight was violent. There was cuts, there was blood, there was clean punches landing from both sides. I think Omar Morales hits a lot harder than what Justin Jaynes hits, so I'm feeling if Benitez can eat the shots that Morales was dishing out on him, then he's probably going to be okay with Justin Jaynes. But regardless, it's not something that he should be taking for granted here, and if he does and Jaynes knocks him out, then I'm not going to be completely surprised. But from a technical aspect, striking technique versus technique, Benitez is just so much better than Jaynes. He uses more of his toolset, more weapons. Benitez will mix in solid low kicks, solid kicks to the body, as well as a nice jab, good 1-2s, good combinations. His movement's good laterally, sliding in and out of range as well. I just feel from a striking aspect, if Benitez doesn't get caught with something from Jaynes that puts him out, he should have quite a sizable striking advantage, a movement advantage, which will give him a volume advantage as well. So if this fight does hit the scorecards, it's going to be Benitez that's landed more and looked better in the judges' eyes. I'm not sure if Benitez can get Justin Jaynes out of there. Benitez does seem to be more of a volume-based striker opposed to somebody that's just going to lay you down with one kick or one punch. Again, I'm not saying it's not possible, but I do think that Benitez's most likely path to victory here is by a volume-based decision, and I think that is the most likely outcome. For that reason, I'm picking Gabriel Benitez to win this fight. And in the final breakdown of this podcast, we've got Luis Smolka versus Jose Alberto Quinones. Luis Smolka's currently the minus 135 favourite. The comeback on Quinones at plus 115 as the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, I do think the value sits with the underdog in Quinones. This is a rematch. They were scheduled to fight a couple of weeks ago. Unfortunately, Smolka had to pull out of the fight due to weight cutting issues, but the betting line was roughly around the same before. I said the same things then, that the value was on Quinones there. I just feel that this fight should be much closer to a pick'em, so plus money on Quinones is where I feel that value lies. As for where the betting line moves, there was a lot of people on Smolka last time out. Whether those people rebet him, knowing that he had a tough weight cut and he's got to go through it all again, I'm not too sure. But I do think that the line will close up a little bit. I don't think we will see the pick'em that I think it should be closer to, but I do think that we'll see Quinones maybe coming down from plus 115 to maybe plus 105, maybe even plus 100. As for how the fight plays out though, like I said, Smolka missed weight last time out. He had weight cutting issues that forced him from the fight also. That surely has to play some sort of a factor here, because he had a tough weight cut and now he's got to have another weight cut again a couple of weeks after. It can't be great for your body. So the fact that you're thinking, is his body going to be as conditioned as it should be to go 3 rounds here? I'm not too sure. I'm not saying it's ultimately going to cost him the fight. I was picking Quinones last fight anyway. But this fight now, I do feel that Quinones has got a little bit of an advantage here in regards to Smolka having a tough weight cut before. He's likely going to have a tough weight cut again. Obviously, Quinones has to cut weight again as well, but, you know, he didn't have the same sort of struggles. In regards to the fight itself, I think Quinones is a very hard fighter to beat. I don't think Smolka has that erratic movement that's going to really bamboozle somebody like Quinones, that's going to allow him to cause Quinones to have issues reading here. I think Quinones is going to be able to read Smolka, his movement, his patterns, and Quinones is just really tricky to deal with, which is where ultimately I feel that Smolka's going to have the problems in this fight, because for Smolka to win, I think he's going to have to score takedowns. He might not need to score multiple takedowns if he can keep Quinones down, but again, that's not proven to be too easy for previous opponents. So I do think Smolka's going to have to get in on takedowns quite often. On the mat, he's going to have to get as much top control time as he possibly can. If Quinones stands back up, he's going to have to reshoot. The reason why I feel that Quinones is going to have a striking advantage in this fight is because of that unorthodox movement. He fires from weird angles. He's hard to close down. He's hard to catch. But whilst his opponents are chasing him, he's firing back. He's the one scoring the points. That makes his opponents more desperate to get closer to him. They'll start to be overly aggressive and they'll start to get some frustration kicking in. And that's where Quinones will really start to just outpoint his opponents and just work his way through the rounds and to a decision if he needs to go there. I like Quinones in this fight. I don't think he's going to be easy to take down. Let's not forget that he's got a takedown threat himself as well. But ultimately, I think he's going to be hard to hit. He's going to create frustration on the feet. That's going to give him an edge in the striking. It might cause Smolka to start shooting from too far out. I think Quinones can take advantage of that. I think Quinones could actually surprise Smolka with a takedown, even if he's having some success on the feet. I do think Quinones has got the tools to win this fight, so I'm picking Jose Alberto Quinones to win the fight. And that's all for this episode of On the Moneyline. I hope you all enjoyed it, and once again guys, I'd appreciate all likes to the video and subscriptions to our MMAPlay365 YouTube channel too. Remember, you can get all the betting advice you'll ever need over at MMAPlay365.com. We cater for long-term gamblers that like to build their own bets and strategies, gamblers that just want to follow exactly what I bet on, and we also cater for you fun gamblers that like the long, shot, fun parlays, or ACCAs as we call them in the UK. Even if you only want our best value underdog for the event, we have plenty of different packages and subscription options for you guys to choose from, and they're all at very affordable prices too. Just hop on to MMAPlay365.com and see what's best for you. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you at the next event.